requiring vacancies in county commissioner districts created by an increase in number of commissioner districts to be filled at the next general election and providing for staggered terms for such newly elected county commissioners. Jason Long will give us a briefing of the bill.
Thank you, Madam Chair, members of the committee. House Bill 2661 amends several statutes dealing with filling of vacancies for members of boards of county commissioners. The primary amendments are dealing with vacancies that are created due to an increase in the number of commissioners on the board. So this occurs when there is a proposal in an election to increase the Board of County Commissioners number from, say, 3 to 5 or 5 to 7. Creates new positions on the board that need to be filled. And so current statute provides under 19-203A that when those vacancies are created, the governor is to either call an election to fill those vacancies at the next regularly scheduled general election or call a special election that would occur sooner. House Bill 2661 strikes those provisions and simply states that those vacancies, when they're created, are to be filled at the next regularly held general election. So there's no special election costs. It would just be at the next general election. And for clarification, because there has been confusion apparently in the past, the bill also defines general election for these purposes to match the definition under the general election law, which is the election held every November in both odd and even numbered years. Because of that change, there are some other additional provisions on page 3 of the bill. The first is there's a general prohibition that at each election you can't elect more than a majority of the members of the Board of County Commissioners. Obviously, that might need to occur if you're filling new positions that have been created due to an increase in the size of the commission. And so that's accounted for under current law. And to provide and prevent that from happening in future elections, there's a new provision on page 3 that says if you have a more than simple majority being elected, then the new members that are being elected, those new members for the increase of size, would only serve an initial term of 2 years, which would then get them on offset elections with the rest of the board. So you wouldn't have a simple majority, more than a simple majority elected in outgoing years. The other new provision that's added on page 3 is if the next regularly held election is in an odd numbered year, so you're filling those vacancies in an odd numbered year election, so they're not constantly up for re-election in odd numbered years, the Board of County Commissioners can set that new initial term for that new member at either 1 or 3 years, so that then they're up for re-election on an even numbered year after that and going forward. So a couple of housekeeping provisions there. You will notice a number of amendments to other statutes relating to this subject throughout the rest of the bill. This is largely cleanup. There are a number of cross-references that are somewhat circular or even contradictory in the statutes. And so a lot of the strike-throughs and new cross-references you see throughout the bill are simply clean up those to make it clear when we're doing vacancies that are for current positions on the Board of County Commissioners versus vacancies that need to be filled due to an increase in the size of the board. This would go in effect on Kansas Register, which would occur before July 1st of this year, and I'd be happy to stand for any questions.
Questions for Jason? I don't see any. Thank you, Jason. At this time, we'll have a proponent presentation by Representative Kenny Titus, District 51. Welcome to the committee.
Thank you, Madam Chair. I represent Pottawatomie, Wabunsee, and Riley counties, and I'm a resident of Pottawatomie County. And I brought this bill on behalf of my county commission. Pottawatomie County in 2022 voted to expand from 3 to 5 commissioners, and then a large amount of chaos commenced in trying to figure out exactly how best to go about expanding the existing county commission. The issues were brought to me by our county counselor, and at one point, including him, myself being an attorney, legislative research, and the governor's chief counsel, we had 4 different opinions on how the existing statute ought to be carried out because of various points of confusion. So this year I sat down with Revisor Long, and we did a pretty comprehensive job of trying to make it very clear how this process would work. One of the big pieces of confusion was over time there have been changes to this bill. So at one point the governor actually appointed the replacement commissioners directly. That got changed when Saline County expanded their commission, but there were some leftover pieces like the governor's special election that just didn't make sense. So what we've done is we've cleaned out the governor's ability to declare a special election because she essentially was just doing what the counties asked her to do. We've taken that out, so there's no funding for special elections, no worry about that. And there was also some dispute of whether a general election could occur in an odd year. Our statute now says that's the case, but in the past that wasn't the case. So that's all been clarified, and the intent was by removing the special election, since there will always be an election that next fall, that's a short enough time without extra costs to get the commissioner stood up. And then the important piece was making sure it's clear how long they're in office to avoid electing too many commissioners at once. So I think we've done a really nice job clarifying how this process works, and I think it'll make it smoother for counties expanding in the future, and I'd be happy to answer any questions.
Okay, I think we're going to listen to the next proponent, and then we will have questions.
Thank you.
Thank you. Douglas Kern, Pottawatomie County Planning and Zoning Commission. Welcome to the committee.
Good morning, Madam Chair and other members of the committee. I'm largely the reason you're here this morning. I'm sorry. I have the great pleasure and honor of serving on Planning and Zoning in Pot County. And in that role, I felt like at times we could benefit from having more than 3 sets of eyes on what was proposed. And so I set about with a petition to expand the county commission. I did one petition and it was 25 signatures short. So I had to start all over. Took about 1,100 signatures to get the roughly 900 it took to get it on the ballot. It passed 2-1, 2-1 in the primary. Then the current 3 commissioners redrew the districts into 5 districts, sent it to the governor, and in that process, the attorney who wrote the petition discovered that there's a conflict in the law such that it wouldn't be possible to legally have an election for the new seats in the county commission. When it goes to the governor's office currently, she has a choice. She can call a special election or she can defer the election to the next general election. In the special election, only the 2 new seats are elected. They're the only 2 up for election. Our county commission recommended to the governor that we not have a special election, in no small part because the estimated cost for that special election was somewhere in the $20,000 neighborhood, and they didn't want to spend the money for that. So it then went to the general election. Well, then when it came to the general election, the law says county commissioners have to be elected for 4 years. It also says you cannot have more than a simple majority on that ballot. In the case of both Pottawatomie County and Douglas County, there are going to be 4 commissioners on that ballot. So we didn't have a way to legally elect 4 commissioners under the current law. So Representative Titus, John Watt, who's the attorney for Pottawatomie County Commissioners, Bernard Irvin, who drew up the attorney who drew up the petition, kind of all got their heads together and worked with the revisor's office, thank you very much, and put this bill together. So my hope is that it will get a unanimous support out of the committee and unanimous vote out of the Senate as a whole, and then we can have an election this fall that doesn't have a conflict in it. Thank you. It strikes me, I don't come in this building very often, but it strikes me when I come in this building, the history and the legacy in this building just is kind of overwhelming. And the fact that you all have been chosen by your fellow citizens to come here and represent them in the business of the state is just amazing. And I would say thank you very much for what you do and keep up the good work. If you got any questions, I'm happy to answer those.
Thank you, Mr. Kern.
Thank you.
Is there anyone else that would like to speak as a proponent? Please come forward, state your name and where you're from.
Dee McKee, Pottawatomie County Commissioner, District 1. And I wanted to add my support for this because I am the only commissioner that won't be up for election this fall. And with the people who did not want to have this happen, if you do 4, there's probably a legal reason why they could say this isn't a legal election, in which case I could end up being the only commissioner for a period of time. I don't necessarily want that permission. I think that this is the correct way we've tried to correct it with thinking it through, and it is important that if the people wanted to have 5 commissioners, that it's in a way that it can rotate after the initiation and serve well. And I thank you all for your consideration. If there are any questions about it, as it sits there as an elected person and how we see it, I'd be glad to answer those.
All right, well, thank you for being here. Is there anyone else that would like to speak as a proponent? Senators, you'll see that you have a written proponent by Jay Hall, Deputy and Director and General Counsel of the KAC. Anyone here like to speak as an opponent? Anyone here like to speak as a neutral? Seeing none, we'll open it up for questions for the committee. Any questions, Senators? Senator Stephan.
Thank you. This is for anybody who wants to bite into it. It seems to me like there's 2 pieces to this puzzle. One piece is what you all addressed. The other issue is the redistricting. Because it's very critical the way those extra seats get drawn up. How did you all address that? And do you have any opinions or thoughts on how that could be codified?
We took a look at it. The law says it has to be on population. Within 10%, we have to have even numbers of people represented. We did have a challenge in our county because the north part of the county is very rural, and if you know Pottawatomie County, there's a great growth on the riverside, on the far south side. And when you look at the issues that come up, majority of them are on that side. So we drew it into 4 districts covering the south side and a large district on the far north. We tried to, I guess I would say, gerrymander to put people out a little more into that far district. But as we are almost all ag background and so on, I think that's been very fair that most of our roads building and stuff has been on the north. I can bring you a thing of that. So it's at that point when the new people come in, they could modify it again. But we have to have the districts in order to have the elections, so it comes at that point onto the commissioners to draw those lines. We talked with people. I know the planning board would like to have all of the votes to be on the north side, but when it comes to housing, and we as a county run a lot of housing developments because we don't have a city in the far west of the county, and so we have all of the bonds and we do the management of roads and buildings and all of that, and that makes it a very difficult thing, but it is basically population within 10% that the size of those districts are there. Is there something you'd like to change?
Other questions? Senator Francisco.
Thank you, Madam Chair, and this is probably for Representative Titus. I know he was involved in drafting this bill. So I'm trying to understand what happens if the next regularly held election is a, election in an even-numbered year, and that would be an election when other county commissioners are up for election. So what happens when there is only, if two people are running in that election, then two of the current sitting commissioners are already running in that election, and you elect two other people who are elected in those new districts, then don't you end up, they serve 2-year terms.
Correct. So the statute would allow for a one-time election that has more than a simple majority elected, but the two new seats would be elected for only 2 years, and that's spelled out in statute. And so then that would fix the cycle on a 5-person commission. So in 2 years, you would have 3 commissioners run for 4-year terms, and then 2 years after that, you would have 2 commissioners for 4-year terms, and it should line up in perpetuity from there.
And that is not different if it's held in an odd-numbered year.
We put in a provision that would allow, the commission just needs to look at the rotation and say, this is a 3-year term or this is a 1-year term, and allow it to line up with the correct general election for the new positions.
So, but both would be for either 1-year or 3-year terms?
Yeah, the commission would just have to decide, yeah, what fits the rotation.
So my only concern would be that they would have to choose both to be 1 year or both to be 3-year.
That's correct, yeah.
Senator Haley.
Thank you, Madam Chair. I just had a brief point of information. Anyone can answer this. I see that we've got Senator O'Shea and, of course, Representative Titus and Representative Auerkamp on. Is there some part of Potawatomi that goes to another Senate district, or is that entirely contained in Senator O'Shea's? I remember Ed Pugh had the entirety, Senator Pugh, our former colleague, and is there not some part of it that's divided into another Senate district?
So for the last 10-year cycle, our county was cut up pretty good. Senator Pyle has a good chunk of the northern part of the county. I'm actually currently in Senator Pyle's district, but I'm only about 5 miles outside of Manhattan. Senator Longbein has everything west of Main Street in Wamego over towards St. George, and then Senator O'Shea comes up from Wabunsee County and has the east side of Wamego. In the new district, Senator O'Shea would represent all of Potawatomi County in the 18th district. So we coordinated with her because she'll have the largest future impact.
Okay, I appreciate it.
Yeah.
Just curious. Thank you.
Yes, I think I'm one of the few reps that I have 5 senators over my district currently, so I look forward to the new lines. Yeah.
Ed Pugh was really intrigued by the whole. Thank you, Madam Chair.
Senator Straub.
Thank you, Madam Chair. Having served on a 5-member county commission, I appreciate you bringing this to us, and thank you, Representative Titus, for your work on this. I'm sure your legal background has has assisted you in that. Currently, when you have a 5-member commission, you'll have 3 members whose terms expire on one even-numbered year, and then 2 years later, you have the other 2 commissioners. So when there's a vacancy in, let's say, this year was the year that you had 3 commissioners being reelected, but one of the other 2 had a vacancy created before May 1st, what happens with that person then? Did they serve like a 2.5-year term and then they're reelected? Or do they fill out the remainder of that term that they were appointed to fill? Does that make sense?
It does. I believe the intent of this is we didn't change any of the methods that are currently in place for situations like that where you have a vacant position that's not due to an expansion, but I would have to refer to the reviser on that.
May I? So I think with a vacancy like that, it could still put the commission back into the situation of having 4 commissioners replaced at one time, right? It wouldn't be because of increasing the number of commissioners. The 4 members would be elected at once because of a vacancy, correct?
I believe that would be the case now, though, even on a 3-member board, and so that should be accounted for in existing
Okay.
statute.
Okay, thank you.
We didn't touch any of that stuff.
Other questions? I don't see any. Thank you. Jason, go ahead, please.
Madam Chair, members of the committee, no, just to confirm Representative Titus is correct. Section 2 of the bill, while cleaning up a cross-reference, makes no changes to the current method for appointing those types of vacancies for current members.
Thank you, Madam Chair, and thank you, Jason. So essentially, you could have 4 members replaced at once due to a vacancy, correct?
I suppose if there was a vacancy and it occurred in the first half of the term, so that then the successor would be elected at the next general election, and you had vacancies due to an increase in the board number of positions, you could have more than a simple majority. But that, of course, is taken care of with the amendments on page 3 of the bill.
Okay, thank you.
All right. Any other questions? All right. Thank you all for being here today. We will close the hearing on 2661 and open the hearing on House Bill 2587, authorizing the Board of Directors for a drainage district to hold a meeting in executive session in accordance with the Open Meetings Act. Have a briefing by Jason Long.
Thank you, Madam Chair, members of the committee. House Bill 2587 would have been one statute, 24-416, that governs meetings of the boards of directors for drainage districts. These are drainage districts that are established pursuant to Article 4 of Chapter 4 of the Kansas statutes annotated to regulate water courses within the district boundaries and structures related to those water courses. They are governed by a board of directors of 3 members who are elected to their position within the district. And under current law, that board of directors cannot meet in a closed executive session for any reason. There's an express prohibition on such meetings in the statute. So House Bill 2587 would amend that statute to authorize the boards to meet in executive session in accordance with the Open Meetings Act. Part of that act is KSA 75-4319, which governs when a public body may meet in a closed executive session. Those have to be closed. Only certain topics of business can be discussed. The topic must be announced in the motion to go into an executive session. There must be a time certain when the body is going to come out of executive session back into open public meeting, and no business of the body can be transacted within the closed executive session. All of those statutory restrictions would apply to the boards of directors for these drainage districts should House Bill 2587 be enacted into law. The bill would go into effect on this July 1st if enacted, and I'd be happy to stand for any questions.
Questions for Jason? I don't see any at this time. We have today with us Representative Kyle McNorton, District 50. Welcome to the committee.
Thank you, Madam Chair, members of the committee. So I brought this for one of my constituents, Dave Jackson, who's actually here back from the Antarctic playing with the penguins over the weekend. So I didn't know if he was going to be here, but this is the water board cannot go into executive committee, and you guys have been on school boards, county commission, other boards where you have that opportunity to discuss personnel issues, maybe property you're trying to buy or sell, or currently that has to be discussed in an open meeting. So this is just putting in line with other boards that are under statute. As I researched this, I went all the way down to homeowners associations have the right to go into executive committee. So, and as Jason mentioned, you know, it's under statute number 754319, which covers all that you can do. So it passed unanimously out of the House, and on the floor it was 116-4. So, and Dave is here if you want to ask him some questions, but I'll be happy to stand for questions when the time comes.
maybe you said this, but why are they different? What happened in the process that made them different?
Madam Chair, members of the committee, as far as I could track it, that amendment was added in, I believe, 1983, but I do not know the circumstances behind why the boards were restricted from going into closed session back then. It would require additional and extensive research trying to go back that far in the state library, and I'd be happy to do that if the commission, or if the committee is interested in the rationale.
I'd just be curious, did it happen at 2 o'clock in the morning or something like that? So, okay.
So, Madam Chair, so when Dave brought this to me, I asked the same question. I said, why is this written this way? And Jason and I talked about that a little bit when he did the research on it and wrote it up. And it doesn't seem like anybody knows. Maybe at that time, people were worried, behind the scene things or something happening on the water board somewhere, but nobody knew. We didn't dig deep enough to try to find that answer.
Go ahead, Jason.
Madam Chair, I'd also point out the statutory requirements for going into a closed executive session were different in 1983 as well. There weren't quite as many parameters, I believe, on public bodies and when they could and what they could do in closed executive session back then.
Sounds like a personal issue, maybe. It happened.
Maybe so.
Any questions for our conferee here today? Okay. Is there, Senator Francisco?
Thank you, Madam Chair. I know that the example that was brought up was regarding an employee matter, and I know that that can be very difficult to discuss. How, do you know how often the drainage district or what authority they have in terms of purchasing property?
If I could I defer to Dave, Mr. Jackson?
State your name and who you're with.
I'm Dave Jackson, and I'm on the North Topeka Drainage District Board 4 years. Good to see you, Senator Haley. I served on this committee 20 years ago as a senator of the 18th District. And in terms of purchasing property, Senator, we can no longer do that unilaterally. It has to be approved by the Corps of Engineers or FEMA to improve flood protection in our area, which for us is the North Topeka, which is very prone to floods. That can't be, but what has occurred in the last couple of years in our district is we have found that we have property that is excess, but unable to discuss the proposed sale amount or terms of the contract or any of those kinds of things without the proposed buyers in the session. So it's difficult to maybe responsibly conduct your fiduciary responsibilities in an open session. And in the past year, we also had to terminate an employee that was no longer able to provide the services that were needed, and with that employee in the open session. So in looking back, I just couldn't see any current reason for not having an executive session for the drainage district boards.
I just want to say I appreciate your service both in the legislature and in a drainage district. I know it's often a lot of unthanked work, but is appreciated.
Unthanked work would have been the 12 years on school board, but thank you.
All right, exactly. Any other questions?
Thank you, Senator.
Yes, Senator Straub.
Thank you, Madam Chair. Just a question on how are drainage district board members currently elected or appointed? Is there a process for that?
There is. We are elected by the people that are within the boundaries of the drainage district. There's 3 members, of course, and we have 4-year terms. Unlike the others, we all stand for election at the same time, though.
May I follow up? Thank you, Madam Chair. So if if the drainage district would need to, say, purchase property outside of the drainage district, could they do that in executive session? Could they discuss that? Or is the drainage district prohibited from acquiring more property outside of the existing drainage district? Because the people living outside of that district would have no recourse on that particular board.
Short answer is no. We're limited at any point to own property or control property within 500 feet of a drainage structure, which are dikes in our case, or Highway 75 as it runs north to south into Topeka is actually a drainage structure. If you'll notice, it's elevated. And that's part of our drainage structure. Of course, the Highway Commission takes care of that. Just really quickly, Madam Chairman, I'd like to thank Representative McNorton for taking the lead on this and appreciate all of his efforts. Thank you.
Is there anyone else that would like to speak as a proponent? Anyone like to speak as an opponent? Anyone like to speak as a neutral? All right, seeing none, we'll close the hearing on House Bill 2587. Senators, on Thursday, we will be working the library bill as well as both of these, House Bill 2661 and 2587. So just come prepared and we will clean up our agenda. And seeing nothing else to come.